Hey everybody, this is Patty. Welcome to the witching hour. Yes, the hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. I have some wonderful magic for you today. A dear friend. He's a paranormal investigator. He's a TV personality. The one and only Richard Estep. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Hi, Patty. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the Witching Hour.
I am so happy. We get to see each other at conventions and here and there. We actually just saw each other
Mm.
moments ago. But you have a brand new book out, correct?
I do. I have a brand new book. It's called In Search of Demons. There we go. Look at that. Came out a couple of weeks ago, but you and I interviewed for this last year.
Yes, we did, and I'm honored that you give me a chapter right here. It was really fun. And again, the part I've read, you just gave it to me, but the part I've read so far, it's really beautiful. So why did you choose you're a prolific writer. You've got what, 30 books, over 30 books, you fiction,
Yeah.
nonfiction, and they're amazing and they're kind of all over the board. So why demons?
Well, I think it's one of those areas of the paranormal that, number one, everybody has a strong emotional reaction to this subject. You say that word and people look afraid or they roll their eyes. Some people think it's oversaturated. Some people think there are no such things as demons. Others are terrified of them and won't go near the subject. And, as a writer, you're always looking for, number one, you write the book that you want to read and can't find. So I looked at what books there were out there for demons, and there seemed to be two types. One were written by believers who didn't question their existence. They said demons are real. They're coming to get you. You should be scared. And then there was the other pole of uber skeptics who said, oh, ghosts, goblins, this is all foolishness. It's nonsense. And if you believe it, you're an idiot, which I think was very condescending to half the world's population and their beliefs. So you can't dismiss this, but you shouldn't blindly accept it either. And I looked for a book that walked that middle path. I couldn't find it. So I asked the nice people at Llewellyn if they would pay me to write it. Here we are.
Oh, okay, that is beautiful. Again, and it is great. And you have besides all your stuff, what has your experience been? You've been, like, for 30 years a paranormal investigator. What are some of your experiences have been, and how are they different than just your regular old cranky ghost, as I put it?
Yeah, I think the majority of hauntings that I've investigated in my career have been garden variety, and then there have been a few that have been somewhat more intense, a little darker. Locations like the Monroe house in Hartford City, locations like the Villisca Axe Murder House, or the Sally house. And I've definitely encountered those cases where there was more to this, I think, than just the plain book haunting. But I also think it's difficult, and this is something you and I talked about on a panel this weekend with John Zaffis. How do you separate an aggressive human haunting, an angry spirit, from the D word, Because I think it's very easy to jump to the conclusion that if it's angry and if it's aggressive, then it's a demon. And I think that's premature.
Right. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think Johnny kind of agreed with us, and he would know too if it.
He did. He absolutely did. Yeah. He has a wealth of experience and he did agree. He's like, oh, Patty, couldn't agree with you more in that John Zaffis way. So it's good to know that he sees it that way too.
Yeah. So, yeah, my thought is that, again, you just kind of know. You think Cranky's ghosts are the dark, and they can go really, really dark, whatever they are. But all of a sudden, if it gets that demonic realm, if there's a knowing there, whether you think yourself as an intuitive or a medium or a psychic or just regular, I think there's just an energy that says it.
Like a signature to it, a kind
Mm.
of, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I can tell personally when different type, a ghost, what we call ghosts or spirits, former living humans, and then something that was never human, not necessarily demonic realm, could even be an angelic realm, could be like a spirit guide or an elemental or something.
Mhm.
To me, they do feel very different. Like you could tell a dog from a cat most of the time, and you
Yeah.
could tell a tree from a water fountain. I don't know.
Elemental spirits and things like that. Absolutely. I mean, if you have objects falling off the shelves or the kitchen islands in the middle of the night, it's probably a phantom cat. If it's It's probably not a ghost dog knocking things off the surfaces, and I can and completely understand that. Um, Demons are, I think, though, they're the steamrollers of the paranormal world. You don't think you have a demonic haunting. You know if you have one, you know? It's like being struck with something high intensity that runs through your life like a steam train. So that's something else I think to be factored in.
Yeah, I think you're right. So do you think more that whenever we talk about possessions and exorcisms and things, and I know you interview all sorts of people
Yeah.
in the book and do you think it tends more that the demonic, if we go real demonic, they're possessing people or places? Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, there's this old hypothesis that essentially there are three types of haunting or possession. Possessed people, then we get possessed objects or objects with attachments. I don't know that I would call that a possession because I think you have to have some degree of life in order to be possessed. And then haunted places. So I think possession implies a living host. But I've definitely heard stories and encountered cases of objects that have attachments which can be very dark. We're all familiar, of course, with the poster child for that is probably Annabelle or Robert the Doll. Haunted dolls seem to be a thing. Um, so I think that we've got that. And then we've got those places which seem to have demonic infestations, perhaps because somebody attempted conjuration in those places and tried intentionally to summon up something negative.
Right. Right. Like, I think and I talk about, like, I think the Cecil Hotel has got
Mhm.
real demonic, where a lot of people have it. Now, I don't know that there's anything demonic, but I do know in just reading your bio, that you worked at the Stanley Hotel.
I did. I gave tours there for 3 years.
I have never been there. I don't know why. It's
Mm.
high on my bucket list, and I don't know why I'm so drawn to it other than the history and the stories about it. But what do you think about that place? Just because 'cause we're just all interested in the Stanley.
Well, we all know it as the inspiration for The Shining by Stephen King, of course. I went up there because I wanted to investigate and it's not permitted. So I figured if I got a job there, it would probably be a little bit easier. I could do that on my downtime, fully expecting because of its reputation, that this would be marketed to tourists. They do tours which talk about the haunting and things like that. So I thought it would be overblown and it wasn't. It's a very genuinely haunted hotel. But I will say that based on my experiences there and having talked to many, many people at the Stanley, it's generally a happy place. It's a happy haunting. So Stephen King did a great job of turning it into this terrifying hotel from hell, essentially. That is not the Stanley. And if you read his novel, the Overlook Hotel has the Stanley's history. It's in the first 3 pages of the book. Stephen King denies that this hotel is based on any specific real hotel. And then he gives you the history of Stanley. It's really funny. But he just made it a dark version of the real place. In reality, people get married at the Stanley every week. So families are made there. People start their lives journeys together. When the hotel first opened in 1909, I believe it was Disneyland. Like kids would get to play there with their families for the whole summer. And one of the most common ghost reports that we would get was the sound of children running on the uppermost floor, which was where the children lived. It was a big common attic space full of bunk beds back in the day, over 100 years ago. Even when there are no children in the hotel, people still
Mhm.
see them and hear them. And more importantly, Patty, no child is on record as ever having died of the Stanley. So I think what we have are echoes. And I'd love to know what you think, but my suspicion is that those children are some of it's residual, of course, but I think when we die, we may be able to visit the happiest times and places of our lives. And if that's possible, what better time or place than those long summers of childhood when you had not a care in the world, no worries, no mortgage, no car payments, no news. All you had to think about was having fun. Wouldn't we go back to that?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I've even talked about that. I don't believe there's time and space on the other side, so you don't if somebody liked becoming grandma and older, they might show themselves as grandma, and somebody else like, "I hated getting old," they're gonna show themselves in their, 1952 beehive or go back to that childhood, and I do think we can go visit. I even think some of the darker, not fun places, like why so many spirits are at prisons and things. Some of them are stuck. I think like people in the Cecil are being held by something demonic.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes maybe if you spent your life in prison, that's what the life you knew. You hopefully you're not being tortured anymore or held there, but that's the world you knew and you go back to it. So that's what I think why they just hang out because that's the world they knew. We're in the yard, we're in the this. But
Yeah.
like happy ghosts hanging from the chandeliers, they want to hang out there because they got married there. I like the whole Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel right down the street where I live.
Hmm.
You literally see Marilyn Monroe, and I don't mean a lookalike from across the street at the Chinese theater. Marilyn Monroe floating by the pool in the chiffon pool cover by the bungalow she stayed.
Mm.
Have her mirror there. It's like I I like when you get to see happy ghosts. Sadly on TV because you do lots of television as well.
Yeah.
You do you've haunted hospitals, which to me that's a place that you're gonna get 'cause so much fear there and out there, and Paranormal 911 and Paranormal so they go to the dark places just like the news. You rarely see the good news on
Yes.
you see the scary stuff. But I like happy
I do too. And it's interesting when I first began investigating claims of the paranormal in the mid 90s in the UK, we have a very different kind of paranormal culture over there, or we did then, because, you say ghosts to a British person and we think of these stately homes and the classic lady in white in the ball gown gliding through the hallway at midnight, with the moonlight coming through the windows. Those were the kind of cases I got to investigate. I only experienced these darker, kind of more negative cases when I came to the US and started investigating here.
yeah. No, and I just got back from the UK on a tour with Liz
Okay.
Carmel and, Phantasm Tours, and that's what it was. We went every place we stayed were these old manor houses in the country, no modern hotels, no
Excellent.
helicopters, and it was beautiful, and that's exactly the kind of spirits we got. We went it was investigation, we did go to a haunted museum in Stoke, and it was
Yeah.
just it was really, really fun and magical, so how did you get into the paranormal?
I grew up in a haunted house. My grandparents' house was haunted by the spirit of an old lady, and it was only when my aunts and uncles all started talking that my grandparents realized that they were describing this lady that came into their bedroom at night to make sure that they were all tucked into bed and going to sleep. They all described her in the same way, and my grandmother was like, "Well, there should be nobody in the house but me." And my grandfather was off fighting in Burma at the time, and they were describing the lady that owned the house before them, and she had died downstairs in the house. And this was World War II. So, you have the German Air Force bombing the town at night. My grandmother's trying to raise a family all on her own. She doesn't know if her husband's going to come back alive from the jungle. All this stress. And I think that this was a mission oriented haunting. I think the spirit of this former tenant recognized that my grandmother needed some help, and she was just a benevolent spirit keeping a watchful eye on the family. When my grandfather returned, she was never seen again.
Wow. I think that's beautiful. Now,
Oh,
you see or sense, were you well, I know you're gifted. I can tell when somebody's got that intuition about them.
well, I used to stay in that same bedroom, and I was half terrified that she might turn up, and kind of half hoping that she would. And she never did. But back in the 1970s, because I'm a child of the 70s, there was no paranormal TV. So if you wanted to learn this stuff, you went to the library. And the best thing my parents ever did was get me a library card. Today, I still recommend it. It's one of the best things you can do for anyone. And I would check out all these books by authors, writing about ghosts and hauntings and things like that. And that set me on the road to wanting to write those books 50 years later.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So still, that gets your writing thing, but going on investigations and stuff, how did that I mean, because you're a leader in this field and in the community.
It's kind of you to say that. So I started doing that when I was at university in the UK. Back then, again, no paranormal TV. Now you can't throw a rock in a town or a city without hitting a paranormal team, right? They're everywhere. But back then there was nobody. And we would get referrals from the police, from journalists. People would call them for help. And what are the police going to do about footsteps upstairs in your house? They're not going to arrest a ghost. So we would get these referrals, help cases. I was initially, open minded but skeptical. And we started to soon enough have experiences that convinced me there genuinely was something to this. And so that was about 1995. I did my first field investigations. 30 years later, I'm still doing them and still loving them.
That's awesome. That is good. So what is your, let's just say, weirdest experience you've ever had since you've been doing this 30 years? Do you have one that or two that stand out as like unexplainable or just so
Mm. The ones that I think creep me out a little bit are the doppelganger cases. I've been doppelgangered more than once.
re-
And of course, as you know, they say, or at least folklore says, that if you meet your doppelganger, it's a sign that you're going to die. Fortunately, I never have. But an apparition of me was seen at a charity event 10 years ago in an old jail in Cripple Creek, Colorado, up in the mountains. And the person that saw it was convinced it was me. I was just standing there on the cell block, and he spoke to me, and I didn't speak back. He went down the cell block, walked into a cell, and stopped and saw me sitting in the cell with another investigator standing in the doorway. So there was no way I could physically have gotten out there anyway. And he did that thing where we say, "You look like you just saw a ghost." Turns out he had. Um, and the only thing that was different was that I was wearing a different color shirt, he said. One detail was wrong, but everything else was me. So that creeped me out a little bit. Um, my voice has been heard and imitated at Waverly Hills Sanatorium down in the Death Chute. My team members heard me speaking down there when I was very clearly up on the roof at the opposite end of the sanatorium. So that gets a little bit personal. That brings it kind of close to home for me, sends a chill down my spine.
right. So what do you think that is? Do you think that's just this ghost with this like I can shape shift and do things? What is your philosophy on this?
Well, I'd love to hear your opinion on that, but I try and keep an open mind because one of the things I think that we are guilty, people like me, and I mean nuts and bolts investigators, people that don't really have a great deal of sensitivity, you know. I think we're guilty of just jumping to this explanation that ghost equals dead person. Well, in the case of the doppelganger, could it have been a time slip? Could it have been a future me that will still, has yet to go back to that same jail because I've been back several times, kind of bleeding back in time, and that's what was seen? Could it be me from an alternate, dimension or universe that just kind of merged with ours temporarily and then went back to my life over there? I think there are multiple possible explanations for it. Or it could be a spirit that's imitating me. And if so, I find that just combination of flattering and sinister.
Right, right, right. It's 'cause yeah, and I know people who think that there's weird kind of doppelgangers out there imitating them and passing them off in themselves. I don't understand what that is either. I think
No.
any ideas are good. I have done time space slips before,
Hmm.
and that is about the weirdest experience ever. And they did kind of have to do with like past life or other life stuff. 2 times, once in the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, again, my favorite place,
Yeah.
mostly happy ghosts. I was in the Montgomery Cliff room staying there, which is like their most haunted room.
Right.
And he brought a trumpet because he had played a trumpet, and I ran into what was I figured out his boyfriend. They just used all sorts of different words.
Huh?
Yeah, you couldn't say boyfriend.
Hmm.
But when in the morning, I was like, I've already brushed my teeth, and I was getting frustrated at this tiny little room. And it was like I was him and I was me, and I'd lost all space and time. It was like we've all had a deja vu experience. It was like a deja vu experience that wouldn't stop.
Oh.
Experience that I had it one more time at a house right here near me in the Hollywood Hills of someone that I had been told of for years that I was the reincarnation in.
Hmm.
Again, I like to start off skeptic as well, like, well, yeah, who everybody's somebody, but it was a silent person. But I found the house by myself, not knowing the address. I figured out that's the house I would build. This is not the house I would personally build in this lifetime, but I kind of knew it. So all this stuff and the universe was throwing me into stuff. So I had an opportunity to go into the house in that same thing, that time and space disappeared. I knew every inch of the house. I don't know if I was there for 5 minutes or 5 hours.
Yeah.
I think there's something to that time space slip, whether that was you just little matrixy kind of thing.
Well, the other thing that struck me, Patty, was that we tend to forget this, I think, in our time and place. But the Society for Psychical Research at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century did a huge study on phantasms of the living, people that were seen as ghosts and that were not dead. Um, so, this was a massive, massive thing. And it was a landmark study at the time. It blew away this idea that in order to see an apparition, that person has to have been killed. So it may just have been a phantasm of future me, which I kind of like that idea, honestly. But um, who knows? Who can say?
I know. I like not knowing things. I would hate to live in a world where everything was, we know this in black and white. And I like the mystery about things.
There should be a bit of mystery in life, shouldn't there?
We should be a bit, and you must too, or you wouldn't probably be in this field.
Yeah, I think this isn't mathematics, that there is always that element of the unexplained that keeps all of us coming back. Um, and usually when you get one answer, two more questions arise from that answer. So you get some satisfaction and you take the next step, but then you're on to the next quest.
Yep. And then that's what we do. So going back to your new book, In Search of Demons, is there a nice story in this or something that you want to tell people, like what you think the scariest demon story is? Whether
Wow. If there's a nice demon story, I don't know that it would sell well, right? But there are so many. I interviewed a broader range, a broad array of people, Patty. So, for example, I picked not just because you're sensitive, but because you are a practicing witch, and I wanted to know what the good witch thought of demons. I interviewed illusionists, exorcists, bishops. I interviewed psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, emergency medical physicians. Um, all kinds of clinical people, and they all told me some their own experiences, their own stories. The one that I thought was perhaps most fascinating came from a clinical specialist who worked with patients who had DID, which used to be called multiple personality disorder. Now it's dual identity disorder, I believe. But the idea that they have these multiple personalities which arise when they are deeply traumatized. And it usually happens at a fairly young age. These personalities arise as a defense mechanism. And one of them, in the case of this particular therapist, her client had developed a personality that called itself demon. And it acted like one. It growled, it spat, it was aggressive, it spoke in this gruff voice like that. So the demon personality was kind of an overbearing, demonic personality. Was this a case of actual possession? She didn't think so because she was actually able to, with therapy, enlist the help of this demon personality and make progress toward healing her client and helping her gain control of her behavioral problem. So, it's more complex than there simply being demons out there. But in terms of an actual demonic case, the one that fascinated me most, and perhaps you'd talk about it a little bit, was that you had an experience quite near you in the Hollywood Hills.
yeah, I well, yeah, I've had a couple, and again, and I don't think this one was demonic, even though somebody caught on fire. It was a very theatrical thing. I live in, like, the oldest neighborhood in Hollywood, built in the 1920s,
Mhm.
house built by Charlie Chaplin, um, and it was a party house always, so, that can bring in something dark. When you're obsession and whatever, lots of drugs, lots of alcohols, decades after decade, that does bring in it can bring in a dark element, not
Yeah.
any judgments there, that just it does. I think it just opens a portal for something to get in. And then it just continued on. The Rolling Stones manager lived there, so the Stones stayed there, and the person who rep the real life textile, and then my neighbor, Marilyn Manson, and that's who was when we did it there. And but while we're talking about I don't think all demons are demons, my one rule in doing seances or work is that you have to be respectful. I mean, everybody wants to be respected. I don't care, dead or leaving, and probably even a demon. Everybody, you don't want to be disrespected, and that's what
Yeah.
trouble always happens. But this one kid was getting really disrespectful, and cool things were happening for French doors flying open, speakers coming on with white noise that sounded like a spirit box, and all of this stuff. But then he said something so bad. We were using a Ouija board. We were talking about stuff going on in the dirt basement. It's always the dirt basement. And all of a sudden, not him, but it's the cameraman facing him. just wings of fire came up off his back. He was not in front of a fireplace. He was not in front of a candle or anything. It just happened. It caught it in 2 cameras. And again, I'm like, this isn't a demon. This is just a cranky ass ghost. You know, cranky in life, cranky in death, and big in life, big in death. This is Hollywood. You know, Bob's a quiet banker is gonna be Bob Quiet Ghost. Some big theatrical 1930s movie star is gonna be just that in depth. And he just wanted to show this kid a lesson. And again, it ended up having a whole happy ending. But I mean, I think 99% of the people would go like, demonic, he burst into flames. I'm like,
Mhm.
no. I mean, there is demonic right down the street. I mean, I do believe it's demonic at the Black Dahlia house.
Yeah.
Do you believe that has taken a whole other, whatever, something so evil there?
That that case, I mean, you just look at how dark it was, and it does make sense. And demons and evil kind of go hand in hand, right? You know, the idea that there are some things in this world that just are so malign. We tend to use that word demonic. But I've also noticed, just as a student of history, that evil very often wears a human face. And I think demons have been scapegoated sometimes unfairly. I can't believe I'm descending them here. But you know, the whole "the devil made me do it" defense is one that is overused. People are more than capable of doing the most heinous things without the intervention of demons. What I've always wondered is that, you know, if we accept that demons are real, these are kind of the heavy hitters. You know, these are not the kind of ground soldiers, the foot sloggers. These are like the boss battle guys. So, you know, why do they hide in a kitchen in Indiana? Why are they not out there on a bigger scale, causing more mischief and more evil in the world? You know, you think,
That is a really good point. Why are they this funny little house in the middle of nowhere for this one little poor family and uh,
right?
in the White House or yeah, maybe they are. I don't
Maybe it would make more sense in terms of, you know, their objectives, wouldn't it? Their goals and their objectives.
know.
But what fascinates me too is that every human culture has had its equivalent of the demons throughout history. I know that we say the word demon and it kind of invokes, you know, not just Judeo Christian, but primarily kind of Catholic imagery because I think, thanks to The Exorcist, we associate demons with the Catholic Church in our minds. But, you know, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, to the Sumerians, to the Babylonians, as long as humans have been able to put down ideas on paper or on clay, we've had this concept of non-human entities that can possess us. And sometimes in the days of antiquity, they were much like what we would recognize rather as a demon today. And at other times, they could actually be beneficial. The idea that sometimes they could do some good for you as well as some bad. A good example that I put in the book was Alexander the Great, you know, a man who conquered so much of the known world. He's recognized today for being one of the great conquerors of history, was said to have a demon within him. And on the one hand, it spurred him on to these great achievements, you know, and made him restless. But on the other, it killed him at 32. So the idea was very much that a demon could be both a curse and a blessing. And if they did you any good, you would pay for it in the end.
That's what that I do think that to me that's karma, which I know is a more Eastern philosophy word, or cause and effect, or action and reaction. I mean, not even counting the demonic. I believe, like on Ghost Adventures, Zach, I'm the good witch, and there was a bad witch, and he loved to throw us together unexpected. Like, oops, and look who's here. And she'd be doing some dark magic in Ed Gein's cauldron where he cooked people, or in the basement of the museum where he's doing something. And, a lovely woman in real life, but just willing to do a darker magic than I'm willing to do. And it's not good or evil, heaven or hell, that any of that I believe in. I just believe you have to live in the world you create. If I'm gonna live in a world of this darkness and hexes and curses and evil magic where I can control people, I live in that world so people could do it to me, and I just choose not to, because I think you can get everything you want by doing good magic, because you can't.
So you're saying you're Blender and she was Alphaba.
I guess, and completely. And, yeah, I mean, the first time he threw me in there with her, she was this little beautiful English woman. She was this little short English woman. It looks like she wanted to serve me tea but she had Ed Gein's shovel in her hand and wanted to kill me. There's
Yeah.
tea to be had.
Well, we're not British, and if we're gonna kill you, we'll make sure you at least go to the next life with a cup of tea first.
Puppets won't be. I figured that out in my trip to England again just weeks ago. It's like, oh, this is a thing.
Mhm.
Just thought, oh, English tea. Oh no, this isn't.
Yeah, when I get a blood draw in the lab, I'm 86% tea is what comes out.
I love that. So, but anyway, she was a lovely woman. She
Mm,
was a witch, probably a well trained practicing witch, but she's passed on.
yeah,
She,
very sad.
I do think there is cause and effect. I'm not going to go, oh, because she was a bad witch, she's dead. I'm not even going to say that. But I see my friends who go dark, and who even work with demonic.
Mhm.
There is certainly witches or practitioners or different things, and they work with demonic energy. And some, like you said, like, well, they do good things too. I have them do my bidding. I have them this or that. But not saying they're going to pass off early, but it seems the more you're playing in that dark, they start getting angry, they start getting
Yeah.
crazy, they start getting paranoid.
You make a great point. Working with the darkness has its costs for witches, and that kind of dovetails with something I learned researching this book. Because one of the concepts that exorcists mention is that when I looked at the Erling, Iowa case, the exorcists involved with that, Father Theophilus Reisinger, said exorcists tend to die young. They pay a price for combat with these forces of darkness, So even if you are in the light, but you are working in dark places, that can exact a price, can't it?
Yeah, I think so. Again, if whether you're good or evil or high vibration and low vibration, I see everything as energy. Since I was a kid, I would see the cords between people, cut the cords, strings attached, the auras, the energy coming out of a church or a temple or a mosque or a park. I would
Mhm.
see that, and I take it down to energy itself. So again, I think it's high vibration or low vibration, and I think laying in those low vibration worlds too long has an effect, physical, emotional, spiritual, all of the above.
Does that render someone more vulnerable to demonic oppression or possession in your experience?
I think it does. I really think it does. So again, if all of a sudden if you're playing in the dirty water down here, whether you're doing dark arts or dark magic, or you're just a bad person, just I'm doing bad things and choosing to do bad things. I mean, everybody does some bad things, but I'm purposely being not ethical or no integrity or virtue. You know, I it just affects you. I think it's like you're getting weighted down like quicksand, and that will affect emotional, medical, spiritual, all the way.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Moving, yeah. And I'd rather play up here where it's bouncy, you know. And yes, we do go into dark places, and I go to spooky dark places, and I'll go into that world. I don't want to be an exorcist, but I'll be a witch who goes into those dark places. I'll clear places.
Yeah.
I would love to. I for the Cecil Hotel, I don't think I could clear it by myself. And I've been saying this for a while, and we're gonna have to sneak in at midnight one day. I would love to gather every high vibration person, rabbi, priest, witch, shaman, witch doctor, voodoo priestess. I don't care. People of healing and of high vibrational, and do a big kumbaya holding hands around that place because it's bad now. They're moving it good idea. They're moving in homeless people. It's on Skid Row. There's 700 empty rooms and
Yeah.
700 people, but they're already starting to ambulances pull up every day.
Yeah.
There's
I wrote for Cecil's Haunted History, a book called American Hotel Story, and even I was shocked. People die in hotels all the time. But you look at the number, and more worryingly, just the sheer violence of the number of deaths that the Cecil has seen over the years, and it's out of all proportion to what one would expect.
You feel it. When I was walking up to it, it's like every step I took, I got more depressed. I was hopeless. I wanted to kill myself, and I didn't even know where I was going. I just was like, I want to die, and it just overtakes you. And if it overtakes me, a relatively well balanced, healthy,
Yeah.
person, think of what it do to somebody who does have a mental imbalance or an addiction problem, which is kind of most of the people moving in. 'Cause you get PTSD just living on the street. So these people are vulnerable in themselves. I have a friend and client who lives across the street from the Cecil. I think it's something on the ground there and underground. She lives in a even though it's Skid Row, she lives in a high-end fancy doorman building where you do kinda have to step over people to get there, but it's an expensive fancy building. I have to go clear it for her because that darkness oozes up from the street into her building.
Really? So it spreads. It spreads like a malevolence.
Yeah, it's really weird. So, anyway, you guys get this. I've just started reading it and it's fabulous. And if you're interested in this sort of thing, and we are, or the whole paranormal, but tell people where they can find you, Richard. They're gonna love you like I do. Anything you have coming up, website, social media, where they can get your 330,000 books.
Absolutely. You can find me online at richardestep.net. That's my internet home. You can find me on social media, Richard Estep Author on Facebook, Estep R on Twitter, or X as they call it now, and estep.richard on Instagram. You can find my books either online or in your local bookstore. Halloween is coming. So
So like,
it is right. It is here upon us, isn't it? So I am looking forward to seeing some of you spooky people out there in the world.
all right. Thank you for bringing your beautiful magic, education, experience, and books to the witching hour. Anything you want to say to people before we go?
The only thing I would say is thank you for joining Patti and I tonight. Times are tough right now for a lot of people, so please be extra kind to everyone you meet. First and foremost, yourself.
Words of wisdom. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Patti.